For those of you joining in on the webinar side, thank you. On the Facebook side, thank you as well. Let us know what city and state you're from as we're getting started. Saul, where are you located, my friend?
I'm in San Diego. I've been in San Diego for just about ever. My wife bought the house where I'm sitting right now in 1967. And
Wow.
it's right next door to the house that I lived in when I went to high school. So we're we're like a realtor's worst nightmare, right? We stay in the same house forever.
You're ruining the curve, dude.
Yeah, for
Come
sure.
on.
Changing the average, that's for
When
sure.
are you moving to La Jolla?
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Saul. And I'm out of close to Malibu, California. So I always say Malibu. But today we're going to be talking about family trust and really the idea of trust in general, because it comes up in real estate, but we just don't know what to say sometimes. And Saul, your background on this is right on. So can you explain to us why we should be listening to you, first of all, right? And your experience on this.
Well, I don't know that I would go that far, but I would say, hey, first of all, the picture that you showed of me was before I had this, the COVID beard, right? So it's like, It's my realtor picture. It's like almost false advertising, right?
You're ready for Christmas though.
But that's for sure. Well, I have a great granddaughter, and this is her first Christmas. Will she recognize that there is a Santa Claus? So that's great. Man. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about trusts and what they are. And first of all, the information about trust, I think, is valuable for everybody, professionally as well as personally. So this is one of those things that if you learn about it, you're going to be able to use the expertise and the knowledge. And remember, knowledge is power. And knowledge is a differentiator. And so knowing about these things will help you if you get in a situation where clients have questions, not that you're going to give legal advice, just that you have some understanding.
Yeah.
And then for your own well-being. And that is that, I over the years, I've been a certified financial planner as well as a realtor. And I try to explain to people how important it is to always think about financial planning, be thinking about the future. And when we talk about trusts, particularly when we talk about trusts in real estate, it's really, and this is, I think, really easy for people to understand, it's just another way to take title. It's your alter ego, right? It's you by another name. So people can set up different ways to have another them, right? You can incorporate, you can do an LLC. There's a number of ways, and they all have their pros and cons. And so a trust is one of those things that you can set up where it's you, but it's not you by your name, it's you by whatever you call your trust. And what people do when they set this up for their families is they call it their family. It's the Tristan Family Trust. It's the Saul Family Trust. And it is a document. You need to have an attorney set this up for you, because you'd hate to have a mistake and have the wishes that are in your trust not be carried out.
True.
So you need an attorney. But attorneys used to do seminars, webinars. There's all kinds of information about this. When I was actively doing financial planning, I worked with an attorney and we would do seminars together. And he was an estate planning attorney, and he would get clients for estate planning. And I was a real estate guy, and I would explain to people about real estate. And for him, it was real important. And for everybody, it's important to know when you take, and you've heard this before, the manner of taking title may have significant legal and tax consequences. Therefore, give this matter serious consideration. Isn't that like in 10-point bold type in the purchase contract or something?
I've heard it, but I didn't memorize it like you.
So yeah, the manner is critical. The manner of taking title may have significant legal and tax consequences, and it's absolutely true. So how do you take title? And if you sell real estate, even if you don't pay a lot of attention to title, that typically there's a difference. There's an estate tax difference in joint tenancy and tenants in common ownership, or community property and joint tenancy, and they have different consequences. Well, holding a property in a trust has different consequences. So first of all, a trust, we typically will form it to put our real estate assets in. So if you own a house, you should consider learning about a trust, because we're going to go over the benefits of it, and you'll see them, maybe that's a good idea. And if it saves you money at the end, at your demise, all the better. So first of all, trust is just another way to take title. And people use trusts in a number of ways. You've heard of, there could be a business trust. This is the big one, estate planning.
Yep.
People use it for estate planning, right? And that's critical. You can use it for charitable giving. Charities are big, and they say, look, you've got another 10, 15 years to live. Why don't you just give us all your assets? We'll pay you a guaranteed income from it. And when you die, we keep it. Right? So if people want to give to charity. And so one way to do it is through a charitable trust. And another way to deplete your estate, not a trust, but another way to deplete your estate is gifting. And so you can leave things to people, you can gift them, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So a trust, different ways to use it. The main one for realtors, because it actually gets pretty complicated. There are many different types.
Yep.
The main type that we're concerned about is the one that you're going to run into every day, which is the one of your clients, some of your clients might utilize to take title to their properties. And that is typically it's a living trust, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But that's the type of trust they'll set up. And the parties to a trust, it's typically 3 parties.
Okay.
The person who creates it. So if I'm going to create a trust, I'm the creator or the grantor.
Okay.
And then I'm going to transfer my assets into, we call that the corpus, the body of my assets. One at a time, I'm going to transfer them into this entity that's called my trust. And then I'm going to designate that the assets in that trust are for the benefit of somebody else. So the 3 parties are the creator or the grantor, the beneficiary, and the trustee.
All right. All right.
So the trustee, now typically if you set up your own trust, then you're the trustee. So I have a family trust, had it for years. My wife and I are the trustees.
Easy.
And so it's our assets. We put the assets in the trust. We're the trustees. We're in total control of the assets.
So Saul, the biggest question we get is why create a trust? What's the big deal?
Well, the first one would be it avoids probate. And so that joint tenancy avoids probate, right?
Yeah.
But there's a problem with joint tenancy in that you don't get elevated basis on the entire asset. You only get it on half. And so as an example, if I buy an asset with you and I buy an asset together.
Okay.
And it's $100,000. Your half is worth 50, my half's worth 50. So we own this asset, it's worth $100,000. The basis is 100,000.
Okay.
Let's say it now goes up in value to 200,000. It's worth $200,000.
All right. I like that.
Your interest is now worth 100, my interest is now worth 100. But your basis is 50,000 and my basis is 50,000. If we own it properly, when one of us dies, the basis elevates to fair market value.
Got it.
And so why would somebody want to own a trust? Because they would like elevated basis. Now, the example I give there, we're not married, so it doesn't really work out. But the first example is elevated basis. We want to avoid probate. And why do you want to avoid probate? You have to hire an attorney. There are mandatory statutory costs. And so there's these expenses and it gets costly. And so probate is public. So everybody gets to see it. It takes time. You have fees and you have attorney's fees. So if you could avoid probate, that would be a great benefit. Now we know in real estate, joint tenancy avoids probate. But you might not want joint tenancy because of the elevated basis issue. And so one way to get elevated basis and avoid probate is to own the property in a trust. And some people say, well, I don't want to transfer my assets into a trust because then who controls it? And the answer is the trustee. But remember, you're going to make yourself the trustee. And so you're still in control. It's just you by another name. Now, there might be another reason if your estate is really big.
Okay.
Then there's another reason to have a trust, and that is it allows you to pass more asset without an estate tax, right? So I don't have to worry about that because married couples up to 22 million, you don't have to worry about it. Years ago, it was 1.2 million.
Yeah, and do you
a
think
lot
that's
of
gonna
people
come,
had,
do you think that's gonna come down in the next,
well, that's what the experts are saying. It'll probably come down. So it's gone up to like, 11 million a piece. They're thinking it's going to come back down again. And so that's something to keep your eye on. What happens to that? And in the event something like that happened, then a trust might help you maximize your estate tax situation. So another reason to have a trust. So if people aren't going to go set this up themselves,
nope.
you're going to go talk to, and again, there are many attorneys that do this. It's almost boilerplate for attorneys these days, right?
So I have a question then on that. Two questions. One is, what's the typical cost for setting up a trust? And then the second question to this is, if we're looking to set up a trust, would you recommend a revocable trust, an irrevocable trust? What does it look like?
So let's talk about cost first.
Mm-hmm.
You could go to, I haven't done this in a while. You could probably go to, what's the legal service where you get documents online?
LegalZoom?
LegalZoom. And they have attorneys that can help you, and they have trust, and that's probably the least expensive way to do it. But again, for me, I didn't want there to be a mistake in my trust that if I died and I wanted something to happen to my assets and it didn't happen, that right. So I want to make sure that the trust documents were done right. But you could do that. You can go to LegalZoom. You can get legal advice. I still hear attorneys advertising on radio and television that they do it, and probably in the $1,000 range, and depending upon the assets and the complexity of your trust. But for people just starting out, it shouldn't be a great expense, and LegalZoom is probably a good place to start looking.
Yeah.
And learn about it. Now you ask about revocable or irrevocable.
Yeah. What's the difference and why?
Yeah. So typically first of all, you can create trust when you're alive, or you can have them created after you die. So that's one way to classify trust. So a testamentary trust is after you die.
Oh, hold on, Saul. We got somebody who says, go Saul, you're my hero. Just wanted to add that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. So first of all, you can create it. The best thing for most people is they know what they want. They set up a trust when they're alive, called an inter vivos or a living trust. And most of the family trusts are living trusts.
Okay.
They're living trusts, and they're living revocable trust. So there are two types of trust: revocable and irrevocable. Irrevocable, you give up control. Now, why would you give up control? Because you get certain benefits when you give up control. You might get certain tax. There are certain reasons to give up control. Now, for the type of trust we're talking about, a trust for your estate planning, for most people, it's a revocable living trust. And so even though you set it up, you could change it tomorrow. You could end it tomorrow. You could create a new trust tomorrow, right? So it's revocable. So the type of trust we're talking about is a revocable living trust. You give up no control. It's inexpensive. It gives you benefits a big benefit is, and I've administered a couple of these for my parents and for my wife Janie's parents. As they passed away, I took over the assets and controlled them. We didn't have to go to court because I was the trustee of the trust. And as the trustee of the trust, I had the right to sign the checks and to mortgage the property and to sell the property, just like I were them. So that you have great freedom to get the things done that need to be done with the estate if it's held within a trust. And that would be a living trust. More than likely, it would be a revocable living trust. And you'd have to tell me if you own real estate today, pick up you own real estate in California, I'd like to hear the reasons you don't have one.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting.
What is the reason? I don't really see a reason.
Because there's a big reason, there's a big benefit in getting stepped up basis. There's a big benefit in avoiding probate. So Saul, when we're transacting as real estate agents, brokers, teams in this real estate world, as we're closing or before we're closing or in the middle, at some point it comes up and we're asked, right? So what
how would you suggest we bring this up? Would you say, hey, look, I've got a great attorney for you to talk to create a trust, and here's why I think you should, but you know what, please do me a favor and talk to this
Well,
person.
it's a great question. And so I don't know that I would even lead that far. One of the questions though I would ask would be, this comes a closing question. When you take title to the property, have you decided how you're going to take title yet?
And then they're going to say, no, how do you suggest we do it?
No, if they say no, I would say, well, I can't give you legal advice, but I do know that people do it in a number of ways. They do it as joint tenants, they do it as husband and wife, they do it as tenants in common, or they set up a living trust. And
they're going to ask, well, they're going to say this because it happens every day, Saul. They're going to say, well, Saul, what do you have?
I have a living trust.
I was like, okay, why'd you choose a living trust?
Because it avoids probate, and because we get stepped up basis upon the death of either myself or my wife, and that leaves more money for our kids. And so the bottom line is, who do we want to have the money? We want Uncle Sam to have, we want the government to have the money, or do we want our kids to have the money? And so this is the way it is, though, isn't it, Tristan? Everything we do, there's a tax consequence. We should always be looking, not only when we die, but when we're working, when we're in business, when we're expending, when we're earning revenues, when we defer revenue to Nick, whatever we do, there's a tax consequence. And the idea is keep as much for yourself as possible. Don't cheat. Just the rules are set up so that you can benefit from them. People should take advantage of them. And then take any extra, put that money away, right? Retirement plans, and part of it. Now we're talking, it's financial planning, where there are objectives, right? One being estate planning.
The more you know about the rules, right? The more it feels like you're actually cheating, which you're not. But it feels like, whoa, how did this person do that, right?
Well, yeah, the way I always approached it was I looked for ways to save money, and I'd said, okay, I'm going to acquire a property this way because the rules say that if I do that, I save money.
All right. So question for you, because I love your way of thinking. Sarah's got a really good question, and I want to know what you think. She says, I created a trust several years ago, but I haven't put my properties under the trust. Do I have to put the trust on title in order for it to take effect?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It is.
And probably one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they set up a trust and they don't transfer the assets into the trust.
Yeah, dude, that's like,
it happens all the time.
That's like buying a house and not moving in.
It's the last step, right? And it happens all the time. And so to answer Sarah, that the trust's not effective if the assets aren't held in the trust.
And how do you do that? Just to answer her question.
Well, you redraw the documents, right? So if I own the property if my wife and I own the property in joint tenancy, it would be Saul and Mary Jane Klein own the property in joint tenancy. Mm-hmm. You convey the property to the Saul and Mary Jane Klein family trust, right? New deed is drawn.
Easy.
Right? It's easy. Yeah, you're going to have an escrow do it. You can do it yourself, right? But it's just a new deed where the current owners, whoever's on title, grants it to the new owners. In many cases, it's you granting to you. It's you granting to your new alter ego that's going to give you all these benefits: ease of management, avoidance of probate, stepped up basis. Now, I have heard occasionally, I think it happened to me once, where there was something was held in the trust when we went to get a real estate loan and we had to jump through some hoop to be able to close. And I don't remember what it was. And so that's something, if I were selling real estate every day, I would be talking to the lenders, talking to the title reps about this. Are you have any extra requirements if people hold it in a trust? And they might. Well, then you might say, how do you plan to take title? Well, we're going to hold it in our trust. Oh, great. Well, I happen to know there's an extra requirement for that, right? I mean, and it's about knowledge is power again. And knowledge is a differentiator. And we shouldn't shy away from these things as realtors and under the cop-out that we can't give legal advice or we can't give tax advice. We're not going to give legal or tax advice. We're going to talk about the things in a knowledgeable way that people need to be aware of. And if they need more information, then they either have an attorney or we talk all the time about having a professional team, people you refer to. And then you got a great group, Leverage, right? And I love the concept of leverage. Yeah. And I love the concept of personal leverage. And so I'm going to go out and if I have a friend that's an attorney, then maybe we can do things together. That attorney might know people that need a real estate broker someday, and I know people that need estate planning someday. And so now we've got some leverage going, because the attorney isn't just one person. That attorney represents 100 people or two, whatever it might be, right? And that's leverage.
Okay.
And so, yeah,
So-
on your team, look for an attorney, and usually a young attorney that doesn't have a big following yet, doesn't have a big customer base. They're looking for ways to create customers and clients. And so on your team, think about having somebody that you trust that you can refer people to in the legal area.
I love that. Oh, dude, a couple of questions. That blew up a whole bunch of questions. Okay. I've got like 7 questions. I'm going to address the one on Facebook first. And it says, lenders typically want it out of the trust, and then you put it back into the trust after it closes. What is your experience with that?
So that's the issue I was talking about.
Yeah.
But that's not all lenders.
Some lenders, right?
Some lenders. And so that's why whoever you're using, that's a good question to ask, right? Because you'll head it off at the pass. If you just know this, you won't get down to day 0 when it's supposed to close and then realize it's in a trust and it has to come out for a minute, right? Because you'll already know. You'll already
ask that at the very beginning.
That's at the beginning. The last time I refinanced was about 4 years ago, and it's in a trust, and they didn't ask us to take it out of the trust.
Perfect. I like that. All right. Here's another one. Do you talk to buyers with young kids for things like guardianship for kids, insurance, etc.? We've seen people refinancing the home, take it out of trust for that, and then do not put it back into the trust.
Yes. So really, that's a financial planning question. And, should somebody do this? Is this a prudent thing to do? And so to take property out of trust or to borrow against it for a certain purpose and then not use it for what it's intended, not good financial planning, right?
Yeah.
So I think the more that people know more, if you're in real estate, see, here's my take on real estate. I've been a real estate broker since 1977. I think the real estate industry is under fire from a number of different directions for a number of different things. And we could talk about it for days, and this isn't the place to do it. But it's important to know that if you're selling real estate, you need to be looking for alternatives. You need to be looking for ways to expand your business in a way that maybe you didn't think of it before. In the early 80s, when I was listing and selling, I had my own real estate business. Century 21 was purchased by Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. Century 21, a real estate was purchased by a life insurance company. And so then Merrill Lynch, which was a Wall Street firm, Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner, and Smith, they got into the real estate business. And they had offices everywhere. You might remember Merrill Lynch Realty.
Yep.
And then Sears bought Payne Weber, which was a stock brokerage house. And then Prudential. You ever heard of Prudential Realty? But before you heard of Prudential Realty, you heard of what? Prudential the Rock Insurance.
That's right.
And so back in the 80s, you had this consolidation. What do you have today? You have consolidations. You got lots of things going on in the industry. Back then, we had the same thing. And as I looked at the industry, I thought, you know what? This idea of sharing databases, this idea of leveraging my trust, because here I gain somebody's trust. I sell them a house, the biggest asset they have. I sell them a house, and then they don't come back to me for 5 to 8 years. I've wasted all that trust, right? So I'm thinking, I got to leverage my trust somehow. And I saw all these big companies getting into everybody else's business. And so I decided that's what I was going to learn everything I could about, and in the same conversation, commissions, there's downward pressure on commissions. Well, I better figure out ways to make money besides commissions then. If there's this downward pressure, how else can I make money? So I thought, so I did. I looked at financial planning, and I looked at taxes, and I looked at insurance, and I looked at all these things. I actually then took the step of getting licensed and getting certified and hiring people underneath me, real estate agents, and getting them to go through the same process. And what it did is it gave us something to talk about, right? So now even if I never used that to make money, I just had this knowledge. And somebody says, I have two children. Now here's a great one. I like 529 plans. A 529 is a plan where you can put money into it, and then into this and it'll grow tax deferred. And you can add money to it as long as it's for educational purposes. So every time I see a kid in the neighborhood is born, I give the parent money to set up a 529. And I say every year at Christmas, and people say, what should I buy the baby? I say, put $25 in the 529.
Nice.
Oh, what's their birthday? What can you get them? Well, they're not going to know what you got them anyway. Put $25 in the 529.
That's right.
Teach people about this nice little thing that will accumulate money for their children. And I guarantee you, when they get ready to go to college, they're going to be glad that somebody took the trouble to put this away for them. It's a 529. But so the question had to do with financial planning, estate planning, about, people trusts for their kids. That's another thing. Set up a trust to skip generations. You can say, okay, here's what I want. Anything happens to me, I want my property. It's in the trust. I want all the income to go to one kid, but then after that kid passes, I want all of the asset to go to the grandchildren.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So on that, there's a question, well, similar to that, but there's actually 3 more questions for you. One, Pam saying, have you heard of, hey, don't put your bank accounts in trusts so kids are not liable?
Don't put your bank accounts in trusts no, but don't put your insurance. I've heard your insurance policies. You don't typically make them the beneficiary, right? Bank accounts, I've never heard that. Bank accounts are, in my experience, bank accounts are always held in the name of the trust, because then one party dies, you don't want to have to hassle with taking control of so I've never heard that, right? And we've never advised for people not to hold their bank account in trust. Insurance, yes.
All right, good. We have a refinance and a purchase question. Thank you from Sarah, because you answered her previous question. I'm refinancing my primary residence. So can I select the trust as to how I want to hold title prior to close of escrow, or wait until after the close of escrow?
Great question. Either, right? So if you're going to do it before you close escrow, obviously you have to set the trust up before you close escrow.
Yeah. And you know what, that's a great question, Sarah, because what we do typically when we're selling like these massive homes out here in Malibu, our clients at the very beginning, they purchase things under their name, but in the process of closing escrow or being under contract or in escrow, whatever you want to call it, they come in and they say, well, look, I just created an LLC for this specific property, right? And so in some cases, they name it like whatever PCH. You can look up Malibu title reports, and a whole bunch of them are named by the actual address of the property, because these are massive properties. So that you could definitely do it in between. So yeah, Saul's right on. Here's another question for you, Saul. Amanda says, I want to purchase rental properties in the future. Do you suggest suggest a living revocable trust for all, or separate living revocable trusts per property?
Like most financial planning and tax questions, the answer is it all depends. And it depends on many variables that might go into that. Some people might decide to own property in an LLC. I'll give you an example of holding probably different properties for different purposes. My favorite property is my car wash. You hear me talk about my car wash all the time. I bought my car wash with 2 guys I went to high school with here in San Diego. Graduated from high school in '67. We bought the car wash in 1978, and we bought the car wash and 2 houses next to it. And we bought it, and the way it's held is the land is owned in an LLC, and the car wash business and the equipment is owned in a C Corp. And the C Corp, and it's only fair, the C Corp, if it owned the land, it wouldn't pay any rent because it owned the right, and so there'd be no deductibility. And so the C Corp doesn't own the land. The C Corp, which has the same 4 owners own the C Corp as own the LLC that owns the land. The C Corp pays rent every month to the LLC. And it pays its other expenses, and it has a net profit. And the 4 of us that own it, we get a check every month for the profits from the business. We also own the LLC that owns the land and the 2 houses, and the LLC has rental income. And every month, the four of us get a check for rental income, which, by the way, is not, rental income is not subject to self-employment tax, right? So if it's in the corporation, if it's business, the more net income up to a degree that you get out of that business, you pay what? The Social Security tax on it, the 13 point whatever percent, and you pay your portion as well as the employer portion, because if you're an independent contractor or if you're self-employed. So to answer the question, you can hold it in different ways based on the purpose. In my case, in our car wash, we own the land in an LLC, and we get limited liability. We get it's a pass-through tax entity, and we own the business and the trade fixtures of the business in a C Corp. Two separate legal entities with different purposes, making money in different ways, paying expenses in different ways, and paying its owners.
All right. So let's say, because there's a more specific question on this now that came up. Let's say somebody's buying a multi-residential unit. Would they put it in a revocable trust? And what would that look like? What kind of trust would they be?
Yeah, so really, I think the question is, if I buy investment property, should I keep it outside of my family trust in some other entity?
Yeah, there you go.
Right. And again, I don't know. It depends on what else you own, how you own it. I don't have any problem owning it within my family trust unless I have an ulterior issue or something I need to solve tax-wise or estate-wise, in which case I would look for a different way to hold title to it. So nothing, each time you take title, you have to look at what you're trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah, makes sense. Well, at the end of the day, you're always trying to save money too, right? So,
and particularly tax dollars.
Yeah.
So how can you structure now remember this, the tax laws, we talked about this cheating versus, no, the tax laws are created because the government wants you to do something. The government wants you to do it. They're saying, if you do this, you're good. We're going to give you an incentive. We want you to get married and have children, because if you get married and have children, we're going to give you a lower tax rate, and we're going to give you exemptions for each of the kids. We want you to buy a house, because if you buy a house, you're going to get to write off the interest. We want you to do these things because we believe they're good for society. And so those, whether or not it is or not, that's another question, but that's what they pass these, right? Part of the social and economic engineering. So economic engineering, but there's social engineering as well. And so if the government wants to achieve good intentions, it has a tool that it can use for this. Whether it achieves it or not is another question, but it has a tool, and that's the tax code. And so it's set up. And so a smart citizen and a patriotic citizen should do what the government wants, right? You want me to own a home? Obviously you do. You're giving me a tax deduction. Okay, I'm not going to feel guilty. I'm going to buy a home. That's what you wanted me to do. You want me to run a bit? I'm going to do what the government, right? So knowing the rules allows you to keep more of the money. If you don't know the rules, then what happens is, and over the course of your lifetime, if you compounded all the money you left on the table, it would probably turn out to be a lot of money. Right. So learn the rules for yourself and for your clients. Not that you're going to advise them, but you're going to be able to talk about it. It's a differentiator. And, Tristan, we're going to talk about this on LabCoatAgents in your groups. We'll talk about it. All people want to talk about it because it's important for them. Yeah. And like you do, you say, text me and you'll help people. And I know you do that. Right. And so I can't do the texting thing, but if people ask questions, I'll do whatever I can to, if I don't have the answer, try to find the answer, right? That's part of the value of belonging to an online community, is people are willing to share and collaborate. Why? Because they like to share and collaborate, right? If they feel like if they can bring some benefits to people, they like to do that. And that's the power of all of this. So there's no way we can answer all the questions at once. There is no all the questions, because every time there's a new circumstance or scenario, you go back and you examine what's the best way for us to do this. For most people, you buy a house, you put it in a living trust. You buy another one, you put it, it's easy.
Yeah.
You create the living trust, don't forget to transfer the assets to it.
Yeah.
Right?
Easy. Yeah, that's the key. Don't forget that second final step.
Big one.
That's an important one. Question, should IRAs be kept out of a trust?
Yeah, IRA is completely separate, right? Because the IRA is a tax shelter in and of itself. Right now, so IRAs, tax shelter. I love having money invested in investments where there is no tax consequence to sell.
Yes.
Right. So if I do. So over the years, when I would always try to maximize money I could put in my IRA. I always tried to maximize when I was in a situation where we had a 401k. I always tried to maximize where I could put money into my 401k.
Yep.
And now I have self-directed IRAs, and I buy and sell stock in my IRAs multiple times every single day. And I can do that without being afraid of, what did I buy it for? What did I sell it for? What's the capital gain? I got to pay it. No, it's inside of a tax shelter. It's inside of my rollover IRAs at this point. I'm almost 72 years old. So I've been rolling over IRAs for a while, right? And so it's in this rollover one. I have complete control. It doesn't cost a lot. It's through TD Ameritrade. It's like almost nothing. The trades are, for the most part, free. And I can manage my money and I can manage my accounts. And, but that took planning. That took years to get to that. That took an early recognition that I needed to start accumulating assets. And I had to look for the best way to do that. And we all know the best way to do that, right? It's through real estate.
Yeah.
So I got this passion for real estate because I could see people acquiring wealth through real estate. And I saw my dad do it. My dad didn't have a college degree, and he was able to buy a house and make money and buy a. My grandfather didn't have a college degree, but he was able to do the same thing. So real estate is a great wealth builder. And whether or not it's your home, or you then take the next step, which I think is part of the power of being a real estate licensee, is to be able to find and make investments for yourself along the way. It's not all about selling. It's about finding and managing your own portfolio, learning for yourself. And as you learn for yourself, you have things that you can teach your clients and bring them along. And I know, Tristan, you're learning every day, and you're doing newsletters and you're helping people, and it's like an everyday thing. Well, people selling real estate can do the same kinds of things as they learn for themselves. They can pass that information along, and don't be afraid to pass it along, because you'd be surprised how many people don't know this, are not familiar with these basic rules.
Dude, I've got about 20 more questions coming through. So if I don't get to your question, Saul, I think we're going to have to do a part 2 to this, because between Facebook and this, so I'm going to get through a couple more. Here's one. We were instructed to hold our term life insurance in our revocable trust. What do you think of that? Is that best? What are your recommendations?
I don't know all your circumstances to be able to make a recommendation. I will tell you this. I had term life insurance for many years. It was not held in my trust.
Okay. So not in. All right. Oh, this is a good one. I like this one. And I don't know if we went over this, because I'm absorbing as much as you're saying too, because I'm not very familiar with everything either. Say, please explain benefits for having revocable versus irrevocable trust. And do you advise you put a will as an attachment to the trust?
So typically there will be, so I don't know which question first. Typically you will have, just because you have a trust doesn't mean you don't have a will, but you don't leave property to people in the will. You leave property through the trust, right? And so you do have a will, and you have like a pour over will, as they call it, pour over will. And so what happens, basically that will says, if I forgot to put anything in my trust, put it in there now. Right. So you will. So good question. You will have a will. It won't be the same, have the same functions that a will typically has, because you've got this trust. So what was the other question?
Difference between revocable and irrevocable.
So revocable trusts, those are the ones that the government wants you to give up control, because only once you no longer have control will you be entitled to the benefit the government's willing to give you, a tax benefit as an example, or some type of benefit through an insurance policy through a charity, right? So revocable trust, and revocable trust, the liability might change a little bit, but no, I wouldn't even consider a revocable trust unless I had something I wanted to accomplish, and I went to an attorney, and the attorney said, here's the ways we can accomplish what you want to accomplish. And one of those was a revocable trust. I wouldn't try to pre-guess why I would need to have a non-revocable trust, because a non-revocable trust is typically something you don't want, because you don't want to give up the control. And if you do give up the control, there are certain benefits. So what's the scenario where you would give up the control? It has to do with taxes, has to do with charitable giving, right? Look at those things. But I've never set up a revocable trust, never advised somebody to set up, an irrevocable trust.
Irrevocable, yeah.
Never done it myself. And, but I've seen it in insurance scenarios where that makes sense.
Yeah, I could see that too. All right, let's see what we got here. Some 529 plans, a question here. All right, let me see if I can get this one. It might be a long one. All right, so hold on. Kids waiting for dad to pass away to get a step up in basis. Is there a better way where the dad can gift part of the trust?
Well, that's a great question. Gifting.
Yeah.
You can gift. Gifting is like totally separate. So let's take gifting and put it aside, and now let's talk about it. Totally separate. You can gift as many people as you want, up to $15,000 a year. They don't have to be related to you. As many people as you want every year, you can give them $15,000.
Yep.
And it will not affect the amount that, that 11 million that you can do before there's taxes that's going to come down. It won't affect that. It'll stay at 11 million. If you give more than 15,000 to one person, it'll bring that 11 million down a little bit, right? So gifting is a great way. And back when I was real active with this, the most you could pass it at death was 600,000 and a couple 1.2 million. That was the limit. So you set up a trust, you made it split in half at the death of the first to die, and you could shelter up to 1.2 million. Anything over that, it was like confiscation taxes. And so every year, my mother-in-law did this, who saved quarters and bought a 4-unit building and built 4 more units over the years and had it all paid for and raised her kids on an 8-unit building in San Diego. And so over the years, she did ironing and, domestic chores for people and earned money and bought this apartment building. And then, so by the time, the kids are all grown up, this apartment building's free and clear, it's making money, and she was making money. And every year, the amount of money she had would put her above 1.2 million. And so if she died, anything above 1.2 million, like the government got over half of it. And I said to her, Eleanor, do you want the government to get the money, or you want the kids to get the money? She said, I want the kids to get the money. So great. Every year, whatever, we'd analyze her estate, anything above 1.2 million, we'd cut checks to the kids. And typically, and then during the year, I would work on the stocks for her, and we'd get it back up above a certain number. And every year, there were 5 kids. Every year, each kid got 20 grand, because the limit was 10 grand then. Each kid got, for the spouse of every kid for years, each kid got it every month. Why? Because it brought the estate down to 1.2 million. And if she died, there'd be no estate tax. And so it was an estate planning tool. Now you can give 15,000. It won't affect. So if you've got that kind of resources, gifting is a great way to deplete your estate. And in 529s, was there a question about 529s?
Yeah, it's the next question. It's go ahead and go into it. You might answer it.
Well, so 529, I saw it is a tax deferred way to, like a Roth IRA, somebody says, a tax deferred way to put money aside and have it accumulate without paying taxes on it. So you can take it out and not pay taxes on it when you take it out for educational purposes. So the beauty of that, there used to be UGMA's, Uniform Gift to Minors Act, and UTMA's, Uniform Minor Trust Actors. And so every time over the years, once I learned about this, whenever somebody would have a baby, I would set one of these up for them. And the reason I would do it, and it didn't take a lot back, it'd take $100 or something, is when I was born, my grandfather bought a $50 war bond for me. $50 bond. Paid like $37 for it. And in 10 years, which when I was a little boy, I thought that bond would never mature, right? 10 years before this bond is worth 50, but I always knew that I had this money. It wasn't really money, but my grandfather did this for me. He bought me this bond, and I was happy that he did. So I know enough to know that if I can buy something for somebody, and if I can motivate people to add a little bit, you get 2 things. Number one, you get dollar cost averaging.
Yeah.
And just a little bit of money over, my granddaughter, when she got ready to go to college, we had built hers up to 50 grand. And I got a nephew and a grandson now, 8 years old, and we got them up to close to 20 now, with little amounts of money consistently. So you don't even feel it, right? Little amounts of money, and encourage people to do this. So I set up a 529. Before that, Uniform Gift to Minors Act, when our employees would have babies, we'd do this and encourage them to do this, because you put that money in, it doesn't matter if the market's high or low, you put it in consistently over time, dollar cost averaging. Number two, you get the power of compound interest.
Yep, that's very
The
true.
third thing is that kid's going to love you when they get that money.
Very, all right. So on that, somebody's got a great question on that. They're saying, well, look, 529 plans are like Roth IRA, except you use funds for higher education. Her other plan, the person that's asking the question, says, I was looking at getting an insurance policy on minor kids so that I can get cash accumulated for, say, 16 to 20 years down the line for them, tax deferred. What does that look like? Have you dealt with that?
Yeah, you have to, what you need to do is look at side by sides. If you're thinking about insurance, look at investing the same amount of money into an investment at some, and the insurance will give you a rate of return. Use that same rate of return and see what you get. Typically, I was licensed in life and disability, so I had a number of licenses. I'm a real estate broker still. I had a life and disability insurance license. I had a Series 7, Series 24, Series 63 securities licenses. I kid people, I had a fishing license and a driver's license. Right? And I'm a certified financial planner. So I had the insurance licenses. Insurance solves a need, right? And so whenever they wrap some kind of financial planning benefit inside an insurance wrapper, I'm skeptical. And when I say skeptical, it's not that there's anything wrong with it. I think to myself, I have to look closer, because they're combining a death benefit with some other kind of benefit. And so there are different kinds of benefits involved, and you have to look at them. But from a purely investment perspective, the 529 basically is putting it in a mutual fund of some sort, is going to have a better return than the insurance policy. At the same time, there's nothing wrong with insurance. I had term insurance for many years, plenty of it. I'm now at the age where my term insurance is cost prohibitive. And so my policies over the last couple of years have lapsed, but a number of years back, I went ahead and got a whole life policy. So a couple of things happen. The whole life policy is good no matter how old I get, and the premium stays the same. It pays maybe 10% of what I had when I had term insurance, but that's okay because I built my estate.
Yeah.
On the other side. So insurance, the way I always looked at insurance is I'm going to need to have accumulated, we'll use as an example, $1 million. Because if I die, I want my family to have $1 million. And if they can earn 6% interest, that's $60,000 a year. And then they don't need me anymore. So I got, wife and kids. I need to take care of them. So I need to put money. I got to get $1 million. Well, this is year one. I only have $1,000. What happens if I die? I need to have insurance to fill that pot up. And so as long as I'm investing over my lifetime and building that pot, my goal is someday that will be $1 million and I won't need the life insurance anymore. And that should happen before the life insurance cost me, $50,000 a year for a $100,000 policy, right?
Yeah, that's true. And then, yeah, that's what we all hope for, dude.
Yeah.
All right. So I didn't answer all the questions for sure. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you by email?
Saul at bettercallsaul.realtor.
Hold on, let me put that in. Saul
at bettercallsaul. I have a lot of email addresses. That one is easy to remember. Saul at bettercallsaul.realtor. All my email goes to the same place. You can send it to Saul at saulklein.com. Goes to the same mailbox.
Bettercallsaul.realtor sounds way better, man.
Saul at bettercallsaul.realtor.
I like that. All right, so let's do a part 2 to this, man.
Yeah,
I think it was very well received. We could do it at the beginning of the year, maybe mid-January, because I think we can continue to go on this as well.
Well, at the beginning of the year, it's great to talk about planning. Great to help people kind of lay out things that they might want to accomplish during the year as they get their financial plan going. Again, I don't do financial planning services for anybody else, for people who haven't done it in years, but I enjoy talking to people about it. And if we can do that and we can help people figure out, the path for them to achieve financial freedom. That's great.
I love that, man. Well, thank you for your time. You're always awesome. You have a ton of knowledge, Saul. So I'm going to be trying to bring all of that knowledge out so people can learn from you.
I'd love it. I'd love it. Well, thanks, Tristan. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you and appreciate your time.
Have a great rest of the few days, man.
Take care. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too.